Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Happy Empowerment Hour with our exclusives on X Level. I am so excited to introduce you to a very dear friend, Elaine Coronado with Argus Events. Elaine and her company have planned amazing events in Washington, D.C., really all over the world. And you're going to get to know a lot about her. But one of the main reasons as well that I wanted to make sure she was my kickoff guest for Hispanic Heritage Month was Elaine's father was instrumental in really helping to create that with President Ronald Reagan. And so I'm going to let her tell us a little bit about that. And I have to tell you, I met Elaine when I was 19 years old in Washington, D.C. I'll never forget, we met over a dress that I was wearing, and you were doing the Hispanic Designer Showcase that you were doing in D.C. And those were just magical times to be up in D.C. in the 90s when everybody was talking about all that Hispanics were doing. And I'm so excited to have you with us today to empower our community, Elaine.
Well, this is exciting. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I am so blessed that I come from a military family. So I was raised around the world on military installations. My father comes from the west side of San Antonio, and he worked his way up the ranks to becoming a military officer. So when on his final assignment, he was in Washington, D.C. I was still living in San Antonio at the time. And by the time I made my way to Washington, D.C. in the very late 80s, my father had already worked with Congress, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus at that time, to push forward Hispanic Heritage Week to Hispanic Heritage Month. And it is a lot of work to make that happen. And back in the day, not everybody had the vision to understand why that was so important. And my father totally understood. We have so many stories to tell. There's so many stories to tell. And our stories aren't just in the present. Our stories go back 500 years. And people forget that the Latino presence started, from the 1500s when the Spanish conquistadores and explorers were marching through, the United States and naming our cities and settling our cities and naming our states: Florida, land of flowers; Nevada, land of snow, et cetera, et cetera. Such an impact. And so I'm delighted and so proud that my father paved the way for Hispanic Heritage Month. And so I tell people, he's my father, but he's your father of Hispanic Heritage Month. So proud of him. And then my mother worked for the National Council of La Raza before they changed their name for 18 years, working with Raul Izaguirre, who is a legend in the Latino community. He's an absolute legend. And he's just someone that he's like our, I don't know, Martin Luther King, just to some degree. And I also had the pleasure of working with Raul because my first job when I came to Washington, D.C., I served as the executive director of the National Hispanic Quincentennial Commission, which was putting together plans in place with the Latino perspective for the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's encounter, not discovery, encounter of the New World. And that's where I started to get a real frontline history lesson on who we are as a community, what we have to offer, our stories, the impact. I mean, our impact goes beyond what we see today. Today, people see like tacos and Mexican food and think, oh, that's the Latino, influence. Sure. Because if I may say, salsa is the #1 condiment in the United States, which has surpassed ketchup.
Right. We love our spice on everything.
We put our spice on everything. So beyond all that, there are stories, there is influence, there is history. And so one of the things I like to tell people is when we talk about the Latino influence, we need to speak in the past tense, because a lot of people speak simply in the present tense when they talk about us. And so a lot of people, when they talk about Latinos, they typically, maybe because of the immigration issue, think we're all just getting here. When in fact, there are many of us who have been here for hundreds of years, generations, centuries, building this country. I mean, it just goes on and on. So the fact that we now have a month to tell these stories, I think it's pretty incredible. So I'm really proud of my dad for that.
No,
I'm really
definitely.
proud of my mother for all she did with NCLR as well.
And I will tell you this in saying that, one other thing that I think is also really important is our indigenous ancestry, right? Because our indigenous ancestry has been around for, you can look at architecture, you can look at numbers, you can look at calendars of all the amazing contributions that have come to the world through what has come through in our blood veins, but at the same time that we share it with everyone that's there. Because to your point, sometimes people ask, why are these months important? And to me, they're important because it highlights something that you might not be aware of, because depending on your circumstance or who you were raised with, you might have not had the exposure to many people that could have exposed that education to you. So I think it's beautiful that it's highlighted. But you and I, we always talk about it, but we love celebrating our culture every day out of the year. As I'm looking at that fabulous wallpaper that you have behind you, talk about celebrating culture. Oh my gosh, we both loved the Catrina ball that the library had, but I'm like, okay, when that comes back, I'm going to borrow that idea because I love it so much. So tell us about that wallpaper. And
yes, it's so funny. I don't know when it happened. It might have been 10 years ago.
right,
I became like obsessed with Day of the Dead.
right,
I think it's the imagery. And
right,
then when I got beyond the imagery and started to understand what it stood for, and to me, it's really about paying tribute to
right,
your ancestors, to your history, to your culture, to your family.
right.
I just became, I just dove in. I just became so obsessed. And then one day, a friend of mine showed me, and she told me, she showed me a sample of this wallpaper. She goes, look at this wallpaper. And it's
Wow.
made in London,
Oh,
of all
wow.
things. It's not from anywhere in Latin America. It's from London. It's a London studio. So
Yeah,
finally one day I said, you know what? I'm just going to buy it and I'm going to put it up. And I don't care because it's just who I am. And I
right,
want people to come over and go, wow, that is so cool. And if you know about Day of the Dead already, you're going to love it. If you
right,
don't know about Day of the Dead, then I can tell you all about it.
right,
We're looking at the wallpaper and maybe having a cocktail. And so
right.
that's another reason I've got my little mood light going on. I'm
Yeah,
sort of like grooving with my Day of the Dead, lighting here.
yeah.
But I love Day of the Dead. And I loved your Katrina Ball that supported the San Antonio Library. That was
Thank
an
you.
amazing, beautiful event. I think it's just so much fun to like literally embrace your culture,
Right,
literally from the makeup to the costumes to the headpieces. I mean,
right.
everything. And then just to go, and then the way you all did it was just stunning. And so we
Mhm.
started doing a couple of years ago an annual Day of the Dead. It was a brunch. Last year we
Right.
had a Day of the Dead, a black dinner
Wow.
on the DC Wharf. And we invited, I think we had like maybe almost 30 people.
Uh-huh.
It was small, and it was so much fun because everyone dressed up and we just enjoyed it so much, and we spoke about our families to the point where some people were getting, I think, a little weepy because
Yeah,
they were just, they had just had some recent passings.
right,
But it's just such a beautiful time just to reflect on our family, those that we have loved.
right.
So I absolutely am obsessed all in on the holiday. And this year, I hope to do something virtual with Day of the Dead.
Oh,
You know,
good.
I know because it's
I'll have an
just
outfit.
so, yeah. I go, I have a headpiece. I know.
Yes,
And
here
you've
we do.
also
Yeah.
helped me with a headpiece too. You
Yeah.
helped me with my birthday headpiece.
Yeah. Okay, Elaine. So I'm so excited about what we're talking about, Argus events and how you all got started. But you bring a really refined and different approach to life. And I'm just curious, with this time of COVID, this time of reflection, what is a piece of advice you want to give to everyone?
Well, that's an amazing question because I read a few years ago an article by Ariana Huffington,
Mm,
and she spoke about how there's a real need to redefine success
right.
because she says right now success is defined as power and money and
Mm,
stuff. And
right.
years ago, she was saying that's why so many people are so unhappy because
Right.
people think when you get that stuff, at the other side of that is happiness. And
Mm,
she says, let's redefine happiness and we can get to happy faster. So she
right.
said, happy should start to mean good health, great family, a great family, great support system, great friends, laughing a few times a day, finding
Yes.
something that amuses you, finding something creative to do, just whatever it is that sparked your passion to go do it,
Wow.
and that really spoke to me. And so I consider myself incredibly successful.
Mhm.
But others, if they looked at my balance statement, might say, you might want to take that down a notch. You're not that successful. But,
Who cares
because
what anybody else thinks? Let
yeah,
me just tell
exactly.
you. Yeah. Who
Exactly.
cares?
And I feel like I'm super successful because at the age of 61 now, I feel
You
like
look
I have
amazing,
found,
by the way.
oh, sweet, thank you. I feel like I found, some peace,
Uh-huh.
some purpose, and I think everyone needs purpose,
Right.
and everyone needs something that's bigger than you are. Like if you don't have something in your life that's bigger than you, then you can easily not find happy,
Right.
but if find something bigger than you, it just keeps you focused. It keeps you like moving forward. And my purpose was magnified during COVID. And I just started saying to people, just very matter of fact, I know my end game.
Right.
They're like, what is your end game? And I said, I want to be a part of rescuing animals.
Mm.
I want to go buy a big farm,
Right.
and I just want to have a lot of animals beyond dogs, goats, whatever, because that is just something I am so passionate about. And that's just bigger than me. And when I think of the COVID, why it speaks to me so much, because right now the shelters are for the most part empty because
Mhm.
people are taking animals in because more people are at home.
Right.
But when the pandemic ends and people go back to work, there may be more animals going back into the shelters.
Right.
And so I already see that like in my head, like
Right.
what can I do? What can I do when the animals are in need again? And I've stopped eating beef, I've stopped eating pork. I'm trying to get off chicken, but I just love my chicken and my pork.
Right. We all do. Both make you
And
honest. Yeah.
no. And it also speaks to the bigger piece of life, which is, the planet,
Right.
and I think COVID also showed us that the planet is in need of healing.
Right.
And one of the best ways, and people just don't like to hear this, one of the best ways to help heal the planet is to stop eating so much beef and pork.
Right.
It truly is because of, factory farming and
Right.
all of the waste and etc.
Right.
So that is something that's just way bigger than me. It's huge, it's big, it's part of this big puzzle of life. And when I look
Right.
at animals, and I just read this morning, there are now animals, dogs, that are being tested who can smell COVID.
Wow.
There are animals, dogs, who can smell cancer.
Right.
We have a client we're doing a gala with, a virtual gala at the end of October, and they're honoring a dog because the
Wow.
dog can smell C. diff, a
Mm.
bacteria.
Wow.
And there's a whole group of dogs that they're training to smell particular diseases. And
Mm.
so I just look at them as these incredible creatures,
Right.
and I just want to be a part of, you know, saving them, for lack of a
Right.
better word, or giving them a home. That's my end game. And
Right.
I think the COVID for me really, helped me understand that that truly is my end game. And I think with COVID, now that my company has switched, we pivoted I think,
Right.
pretty quickly from in-person events to virtual events. And when I do events, I'm just like, all right, we've got to do more events, because it's not just about me paying the mortgage and paying my bills. It's about putting money aside so I can go buy that farm.
Right. Good.
And I can also, start doing something to support the animals. So that speaks to me so much. And it started with Ariana Huffington's article on a redefinition of success.
Right.
She's absolutely right. Each
Right.
of us, we need to stop thinking about, well, when I, have X amount of money in the bank, I'll be successful.
Right.
No, not
No.
necessarily.
Right.
Not necessarily. So
Success comes from here, and everybody thinks it comes from
yes,
outside, but it really
yes,
comes from your heart.
yes. And
Yeah.
I find some of the most unhappy people I know continue to define happiness based on money and power, and they're never going to be happy.
Right.
And so I think I just, and that's what I share with my friends.
Right.
We always have these, whenever we have a cocktail, we get deep and profound.
Right.
We always start talking about happiness and what is your end game and what is your purpose. And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people, COVID, which completely flipped the planet upside down, I hope made people really reflect and think about that.
Right.
And no doubt you did. I think we all did.
I agree with you completely. I think all of us had, and as I'm seeing this and when you're talking, I'm thinking of a reset button. It's sad for all the lives that have been lost, and what's happened to humanity. But when I was talking to Montserrat, one of the actresses we represent as well, and we were chatting, she goes, but the world needed a reset. I hate to say this. She goes, we've gone so far one way that I feel it's like Mother Earth or nature when you say, are you taking that reflective time in? And congratulations on you pivoting. First of all, I'm figuring out how to do the virtual events, because I know everybody's been talking about that, because philanthropy is important to both of us. So I know what you're doing is make a difference beyond the beautiful farm. But good for you for being able to say, what is your end game? It's interesting for myself. When I decided to open a company, I remember Ramiro and my mom, they were like, okay, but are you sure you're ready to do this? I said, my soul needs this. There was no, I have to go do something bigger, because I know I'm meant to do something else. Even though I love the company, I love what they're doing, and they really were wonderful and supportive. But to your point, I needed to make that part happy as well. And I will tell you, you as a woman, I'm sure that we all face a lot of risks with the things that we're doing. But when we pivot, I think, especially right now in COVID, sometimes people are afraid because they're afraid. So I'm curious, how did you get past that fear? Because you told us your end game. One thing is coming up with it, but another thing is taking action. So I'm just curious. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, what's funny though, I think for a lot of people, we all know COVID, for us at least, came out of nowhere.
Right.
We did our last in-person event March 5th in New York City with about 800 doctors sitting in a theater, shoulder to shoulder. Right. And we were just starting hearing about COVID. And I'm thinking, oh, well, we'll just bring hand sanitizer and, some wipes. Everyone will be safe,
yeah.
Right? And then it started just snowballing, because we had an event March 12th in Washington, D.C. And a few days before, it was going to be 600 people at the Mellon Auditorium here in Washington. And the client was like, we're on calls with the board. And it was just getting bigger and bigger. Right. Information was coming up faster and faster. And then they canceled. And because of that, and I must say, one thing I'm really proud about, when we canceled, because all the bills had been paid, we did turn all the catering that was already paid for, and we did donate, I think, 500 meals to a local nonprofit. And with the florist, we took all the flowers that he was making. He was making very tall, buffet centerpieces, and we had them lower them, put them in smaller vases, and those went to seniors who were homebound. So that felt good.
Yeah.
But then that was September 12th, September 13th, I remember, was a Friday, and I just closed the doors to my home, and I went into isolation. And then clients were like, we love you, but we'll see you next year. Some of them were, let's try to figure this out. And, we were so busy just getting through that, let's figure it out. And when the dust cleared, like a month or 6 weeks later, we were like, there's no more live events. And right. People keep saying, maybe this summer. And I think at some point, then I found a course online to become certified virtual event planners. And I told my creative director, I go, we've got to take that. We need to figure this out. And we did have our first virtual event on the middle of April, because she found a platform. And she showed it to me. And I remember she told me, I said, I'm following your lead. Right. I'm out of my element, right. But if you've got it, I've got it. So, and we just jumped in with a lot of faith. Client was really happy. And that was the beginning of like, okay, we've got this. And but it's not easy. Virtual is so hard.
Right.
There's so much technology. Every event is so different. You could do it completely on your own, or bring in a tech crew, or go to a studio. And then there's just so many different ways to do it. It's mind-boggling.
Right.
And I mean, we've had our share of hiccups like everybody else, but you just keep moving forward
Right.
and learning and learning. And I think the reason I was so motivated is because I have a mortgage.
Right.
I always tell
Yes.
people,
Very
it's
much.
just that simple. I have
Right.
a mortgage to pay. I'm super motivated. And then I did get some government support, and that was nice. But I'm just at the mindset of, okay, thank you, federal government.
Right.
And we also got a local micro grant. Thank you. But it's up to me to figure this out.
Right.
And then for some reason in July, it just started snowballing in the other direction. And now we're incredibly busy,
That's
which
beautiful.
I'm so blessed for.
Right.
And even at my most stressed out late night moment, I keep telling myself, all right, this is tough, but we're so lucky.
Right.
We're so lucky because I know so many people in the event world who do not have revenue coming in.
Right.
And our industry, for the most part, it's dead. Live
Right.
events are over. Although we were in New Jersey last week doing a hybrid event with 100 people, with some more doctors and 300, I think like about 300 more watching via live stream. And we've also had a chance with Google. We love working with Google. They did their own virtual salon dinner, and we just designed the boxes that all the guests received so that during the event they could open up, items to kind of give them an experience. And I thought,
Right.
so that was creatively fun. That
Right.
was fun. So it's just, and as I mentioned, we're going to be working in a gala at the end of October with the dog,
I love it.
and there's a drag queen coming out, and I just think it sounds like the most fun event. So
I want to make sure I support that event, as we all love philanthropy, and I love dogs, and and you and a drag queen. I'm like, I'm there. This will be so much fun. Exactly.
Yes.
And Elaine, going back to, I will tell you this, as in summarizing our great conversation that we've had today, I love that we've talked about how important it is to celebrate all of you, because I also think that that's part of success as well, is knowing your ancestry so you can then know how to celebrate others around you as well, because you're proud of what's there. Because I think that at times, sometimes that's forgotten and people don't realize how, I think that by loving all of you, you can love everyone that's around you as well. And I want to thank you again and your family for really helping open up the eyes for many people to be able to celebrate that. And I will say this, I miss the DC days of September and October when we were all there together. And it was one gala after the other. And but those are some of my funnest memories, because the things I learned at such a young age, being around these great conversations and the Alma Awards and everything else that was happening, it's beautiful. And I think, if anything, it's also reflective for many of us that had those experiences to never take them for granted, as you said earlier.
Right. That's exactly right.
Not to take that for granted.
Absolutely. And right now everything's virtual. Even with Hispanic Heritage Month, and people are still tuning in because there's such a strong need to be connected to our community,
right?
And to support our, those receiving awards, be they well known or not well known,
right?
So there's just so much. So I'm so super proud of my dad for doing that. And every time about this year, my dad gets a little bit of like kudos, and that always makes me proud. And just the other day, someone was emailing my dad, and my dad reminded me of something. He said, my father has the pen that Reagan used to sign the proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month. And I said, Dad, hold on to that pen, because when the day comes when there's an American Latino museum under the Smithsonian on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., that pen is going into that museum.
Yes, that gave me chills.
Yes. And there's, and I'm sure within your family, within every family, there's something that could go into the Smithsonian, because we just all have so much history.
Right.
We have so much history.
No, definitely. And I will tell you, Elaine, I always like to end with a piece of advice for the Happy Empowerment Hour. And I love our conversation. I mean, if it was you and I, we would be on here giving everyone event advice probably like for 3 hours. Probably should come up with our own workshop, quite frankly, from all the things that you've done, which is fantastic. But you talked about making sure that everybody was truly happy. And what is that? You talked about the end game. You also talked about pivoting, which are three important topics. But I want you to close the show with the last piece of advice you want to give our audience to remember. And I will also challenge you, but while you're thinking about that, is at the end in our comments, we will list maybe some of these organizations that you've talked about that you're supporting, because you never know who in the virtual space might be able to help them. I know this will air in October, but I just want to make sure that they know some of the great causes that they can support and how they can support you with all the beautiful animals, because I know how much we love truffle.
But frequently, a friend comes to you, they're unhappy, they want to talk. And I have one little phrase that I tell everybody. And I tell myself this too, because sometimes I need to hear this. Go be happy, whatever that looks like.
Yes.
And because some people are like, well, I should do this. Just go be happy. You define what that is.
Right.
You don't have to answer to, well, my family will be disappointed, or my partner will be disappointed, or whatever will be disappointed. Go be happy, because we're not here that long, and I think COVID's reminded of us that too, is that we just have to be happy. And if you're invited to a party, once this COVID's over, you go.
Right.
You go to that party.
Exactly.
And if you can get all dressed up and put on your red lipstick, whatever, and by the way, this piece of jewelry I'm wearing in your honor.
Oh,
I'm wearing it because my mother told me that you told her you were at, I think, a Dominion. There was like a Dominion fair, I think. And my mother said, you said Elaine would love this.
Yes, I did. And I love the butterfly. It was beautiful. Yes.
Thank you.
Aww.
So I think ultimately, we have to know our end game. We have to redefine happy. And at the very end, we just have to say, go be happy, whatever that looks like.
Right. Wow. Well, those are the best words to end today's, happy empowerment hour, is literally with Elaine reminding you to always search for your happiness, because as long as you're happy, everything will fall into place the right way. So without further ado, do not forget to subscribe, because you never know what fabulous friend of mine you're going to meet. And today, I know you're going to be happy with Elaine. So thank you, beautiful friend. I'm so grateful for you for your time. And I hope to see you again soon.
Oh my goodness, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Next time with tequila, I hope.
Yes.
Definitely. All right, everyone. Bye.